The story began by showing us that while playing, the girl discovered something terrifying. There was a hungry wild dog nearby. The girl, scared, naturally stepped back. In the blink of an eye, the wild dog started moving towards her. Trembling with fear, the girl immediately called out for her father. However, when the father looked, he found that his daughter had already reached the edge of a ditch. He was continuously making noises to scare the wild dog away while reassuring his daughter not to move. Who knew that instead of getting scared, the wild dog kept advancing towards the girl. And now, the girl was only half a step away from the ditch. The father immediately instructed his daughter to stay still. Then, he picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at the wild dog. But the girl's consciousness, he saw his wife continuously calling out to their daughter. Nick saw this scene and felt as if the sky had fallen. He couldn't accept that his lively daughter was now leaving him. He stood there frozen, unable to comprehend what to do. Suddenly, his wife came running and held his head, trying to snap him out of his despair. Due to his wife's persistent patting, Nick finally returned to reality. Once fully conscious, he saw that his daughter wasn't dead. Her arm had broken during the fall. Encouraging his daughter, Nick began to check her injury. After ensuring she could be moved, Nick immediately picked up his daughter and placed her in the car. In a great hurry, he pressed the accelerator straight to the floor and presented a scene on the highway reminiscent of the Fast and the Furious. However, Nick safely got his daughter to a nearby hospital, but he was surprised to see that despite being so remote, this hospital was crowded with patients. Out of compulsion, he wanted to go and stand ahead in the line, but the nurse told him that he should stand in the line properly. A helpless Nick then went back to his seat and started waiting. However, at that very moment, Nick suddenly noticed that hospital staff were secretly handing a box labeled organ to a transport worker, as if some mysterious transaction was happening between them. Seeing this, Nick became a little worried. But at this time, he only wanted to get his daughter treated as soon as possible. As time passed, their turn for registration gradually came. But since Nick and the others were not local residents, the nurse had to create their file first. As soon as they filled in the basic information, the couple became anxious upon hearing the nurse's next question. Would you like to register Perry as an organ donor? No. May I persuade you to reconsider joining the children's organ transplant list? Not now. Please. When the nurse saw the couple's reluctance, she immediately explained that it was the hospital's standard procedure. After entering all the information, the hospital finally began the daughter's checkup. Soon, a friendly doctor arrived to perform the daughter's physical examination. Fortunately, the girl's arm was broken, but she had no other injuries. But Nick was surprised to see that the doctor was taking a great interest in his daughter's eyes, continuously complimenting their beauty and repeatedly examining them. Afterwards, he told the couple that although the girl seemed fine on the outside, the possibility of internal injuries couldn't be ruled out, so she would need a CT scan. Hearing the doctor, the couple signed the consent form for the test without any hesitation. However, it was surprising for Nick that as soon as he signed, the doctors from the examination project arrived immediately. Compared to when they entered the hospital, the doctors were much more enthusiastic now, and even gifted the girl a toy. Then they seated the girl on a wheelchair and took her towards the elevator. Nick also wanted to go along, but the doctor informed him that the area downstairs was the hospital's strict control zone, and only one family member was allowed to accompany. Nick didn't think much and let his sensible wife go downstairs with their daughter for the test. But from this point on, strange things started happening. Nick sat waiting. But hours passed, and he saw that his wife and daughter still hadn't returned. Sensing something wrong, Nick went to the front desk for information. However, upon checking, the person there said the girl's name wasn't in the system. Nick was very surprised. He had just brought his daughter for registration in the morning. So how could her name suddenly be missing? The more Nick spoke, the more agitated he became. The nurse called the CT scan room associate. But the response was that the last scan had ended at 9 a.m., and the patient was a 62-year-old man. So what are you telling me? I'm sorry, they are not here. We've lost our family. Perhaps you are in the wrong hospital. Hearing this, Nick was stunned. He couldn't understand how two living people could suddenly vanish. To get to the bottom of this, he sneaked into the emergency room and started searching for his wife and daughter, bed by bed. What the hell? Do you have a problem? I'm sorry. But security personnel immediately stopped him for this action, and the doctor on duty also came to see upon hearing the noise. But when the chief doctor heard about Nick's situation, he said he had the entire day's registration record. However, he checked the entire registration register but found no information about the girl. The incident was becoming more and more mysterious. Why did the mother and daughter suddenly disappear after entering the hospital? Although Nick couldn't understand what happened in between, he still believed that his wife and daughter were somewhere in the hospital. Just then, he saw that the nurse standing nearby was the same one who had attended to them in the morning. The bearded doctor called her over and asked if she had seen Nick in the morning. The woman said she had indeed seen him, but Nick had come to the hospital alone, and she herself had bandaged his injury. Upon hearing this, Nick's face changed. Why are you lying? You have a bad injury. You are lying. What have you done with my family? I'm leaving. You can't go. As Nick became agitated, the nurse immediately gave him a sedative injection to prevent the situation from escalating. Because Nick had disrupted the hospital's operations, the doctor instructed security to lock him in a room, hoping he would calm down after regaining consciousness. But worried about the safety of his wife and daughter, how could Nick sit quietly? However, since he was given a sedative, he wanted to go out but was unable to, and his condition became sluggish. As his consciousness began to blur, he suddenly saw adrenaline kept in the cupboard. Anxious to find his wife and daughter, he thoughtlessly continuously injected it. Nick immediately became agitated. Then, wrapping a towel around his fist, he delivered a powerful punch to the glass. Nick escaped and began searching for his wife and daughter. Just then, he suddenly saw a familiar face, the same doctor who had taken their daughter for the CT scan in the morning. Then, at the same time, the security guard spotted him again. Seeing this, Nick started running. To avoid arrest, they deemed it appropriate to flee the hospital. Fortunately, they hid in the car in time, so the security guards couldn't see them. Looking at his wife's phone on the passenger seat, Nick sank into deep despair. Clearly, my wife and daughter both came to the hospital. Then why is no one believing me? As they were immersed in despair, they suddenly saw a police car in the rearview mirror. Seeing a ray of hope, Nick stopped the police car and told the two officers the entire incident. After understanding the whole situation, the police officers were also incredulously surprised. To verify its truth, they took Nick back to the hospital. The nurse at the reception made a mysterious call as soon as she saw Nick and the others, as if there was some hidden secret in this hospital. As soon as they reached the reception, Nick saw the security guard coming. Both persisted in their views. The security guard considered Nick insane, but Nick believed his wife and daughter were there. Finally, at the police's insistence, the security guard took them to the chief physician. But facing police pressure, the bearded doctor kept repeating the same old things. He said there was no record of Nick's daughter. And according to the morning shift staff, Nick had been alone from start to finish. His wife and daughter were never seen. He said if the police didn't believe it, they could take them to the CT scan room on the 3rd floor. The scan records would be there. But suddenly, Nick said the doctor was lying. He clearly remembered that his wife and daughter had taken the elevator going down in the morning. Our imaging lab is on the 3rd floor. No. I saw them entering the elevator and going down. He is clearly confused. Our lab is on the 3rd floor. Can you take us there, please? Soon, the people reached the 3rd floor via the elevator, and the last time shown on the equipment was 9 a.m. This also meant that no one had used this equipment after that. But Nick believed the hospital had tampered with something. They must have hidden his wife and daughter. That's why there was no record on the equipment. With no clues, the police officers requested to call the main doctor from the morning shift. Seeing that person arrive, Nick became excited and immediately asked if he recognized him now, also saying that he had examined his daughter's arm. After listening to Nick, the doctor confirmed Nick's statement. Nick breathed a sigh of relief, but hearing what came next, he broke down again. He came in walking, and our Dr. Bruce spoke to him. He examined him and told him that he had been in a car accident. His behavior seemed quite unstable. Dr. Walker asked me to see him, so I recommended a CT scan, which he refused. He insisted he wanted to go back to the lobby to wait for his wife. What was his wife's name? Abby. His wife's name was Abby, but the police felt something was amiss upon hearing this, because Nick's wife's name wasn't Addie. But Nick said that was his deceased ex-wife. Then, becoming emotional, Nick said he suspected the doctor had seen his ex-wife's name on the insurance policy and used that name to create confusion, to get him declared insane and hide the hospital's crimes. Then the security guard intervened and said, since neither party could prove their innocence, why not check the surveillance footage? If Nick's wife and daughter had actually come to the hospital, they would definitely appear in the surveillance video. Strangely, however, everyone watched all the surveillance and found that from start to finish, Nick was alone, and his so-called wife and daughter were nowhere in the video. By now, even the police officers began to doubt Nick's situation, because the surveillance footage and Nick's story didn't match at all. Now everyone suspected Nick had a problem with his mind. The chief doctor, seizing the opportunity, said he had called the hospital's psychiatrist, who could certainly help Nick recall the day's events. But just as Nick was also beginning to doubt himself, he suddenly found his daughter's dropped scarf under a bed, which was enough to prove he wasn't lying. The police took the scarf and saw it had bloodstains on it. Nick quickly said it was from his head, but the doctor said this proved nothing. Perhaps Nick had brought it himself. At that moment, a woman arrived behind Nick, and she was the psychiatrist called by the hospital, trying to mentally stabilize Nick. When the psychiatrist heard about Nick's experience before coming to the hospital, he felt Nick must have suffered a serious head injury, causing memory confusion. He is confused. I suggest we go to the place where he said his daughter was injured. What do you think? Maybe they are still outside. Soon, everyone reached the incident site, and after a brief search, they actually found something. There was a large bloodstain under the ice. Nick said it was from his head injury, but the police officers didn't believe it because the amount of blood was too much, enough to be fatal, and clearly, it couldn't be from a minor injury. It was obvious it was his daughter's. And from the beginning, the psychiatrist suspected that Nick, in a distraught state of mind, had killed his wife and daughter. Later, due to extreme fear, to escape reality, Nick imagined that his daughter fell after being scared by a wild dog. And then he and his wife took the daughter to the hospital where bad people harmed them. Facing the psychiatrist's questions, Nick was distraught, remained silent, and seemed to have accepted this fact. Now he snatched an officer's pistol. He took the psychiatrist hostage and threatened everyone to put their weapons down. Then he locked everyone in a small room, drove off in the police car, and immediately headed towards the hospital. To move around inside the hospital easily, he disguised himself as a doctor and entered the elevator as per his plan. But he was surprised to find that the button for the lower floor required a key. Just as Nick was in despair, the security guard was about to enter the elevator. Nick pulled him inside. Nick threatened him with the gun to hand over the key, and with a gun in Nick's hands, the security guard was forced to comply. But the security guard was very clever. He intentionally dropped the key on the floor, and as Nick bent down to pick it up, he attacked Nick and knocked the gun from his hand. A fight ensued between the two, and Nick, concerned for his family, used all his strength. Soon, he gained the upper hand and strangled the security guard to death with his hands. After dealing with this problem, Nick immediately picked up the key from the floor and inserted it into the elevator. The elevator soon arrived on the mysterious second floor. At this time, there was determination in Nick's eyes. Even if this place was dangerous, he had to save his beloved family. But he was surprised to see that this bright, long corridor was completely empty. Suddenly, something in the trash can caught his attention. It was the same toy the doctor had given his daughter in the morning. Seeing this strengthened Nick's resolve. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening was heard, causing Nick to hide in a corner in fear. He saw two doctors pushing a cart out of an operating theater. And what frightened Nick was that the two boxes on the cart were labeled human organ in large letters. Nick immediately had a terrible premonition. So, as soon as the two moved away, he immediately rushed into the operating theater. He saw two blood-soaked corpses lying on the bed. Suppressing his fear, Nick looked and found that one corpse had all its organs removed and the other's eyes had been taken out. He remembered the scene of the deal made in the morning, and then he recalled how the main doctor had stared at his daughter's eyes during the examination. Connecting all these abnormalities, Nick guessed that this hospital was probably involved in organ trafficking. Just then, a nurse passed by outside, and she was the same nurse who had earlier asked Nick if they had registered their daughter as an organ donor. It seemed they had their eyes on his wife and daughter from the beginning. Thinking this, he followed her, and then he saw that the person lying on the bed was his own daughter. Seeing this, Nick barged straight into the ward without any hesitation. No one dared to step forward upon seeing the aggressive Nick. Seeing that his daughter was breathing, Nick breathed a sigh of relief. After this, he threatened everyone present to take off their masks. But he was surprised to see that behind the masks were all the same doctors and nurses he had met before. Soon, he also found his wife in the corner. Angry, Nick immediately wanted to take his wife and daughter and leave. But at that moment, a doctor from behind suddenly grabbed Nick tightly. Everyone pinned him down on the bed and attempted to give him a sedative injection. However, the next moment, a gunshot caused chaos in the operating theater. Without bothering about any of this, Nick tried to escape with his wife and daughter. But the strange thing was that all the doctors were trying to stop him from leaving. But Nick had only one goal: to get his family out of there. Whoever tried to stop him, Nick would shoot without any hesitation. Finally, Nick succeeded in rescuing his wife and daughter. And the film was now heading towards its biggest twist. Seeing his wife and daughter sitting in the back seat, trembling with fear, Nick began to hum a lullaby to console them with the song. But from the audience's perspective, the mother and daughter in the back seat had disappeared. In their place was now a critically injured young man. And at this very moment, the whole truth was finally revealed. Actually, everything that happened to the wife and daughter in the hospital was Nick's imagination. Because when the wild dogs pushed the daughter into the deep ditch, she had died right then. Seeing his beloved daughter die like this, Nick felt as if his world had ended. By the time his wife arrived and started asking the reason for their daughter's tragic death, Nick pushed her, causing her to hit the iron bar of the bus. In just a moment, the wife was gone forever. Nick felt as if struck by lightning. Under both mental and physical torture, he unknowingly created a mental dissociation. He imagined that his wife and daughter weren't dead. Instead, they knew that if Nick took him away, thinking he was his wife and daughter, the young man would die. Therefore, everyone was trying their best to stop him. And until now, Nick was still lost in his delusion, innocently thinking that his wife and daughter were sitting in the back seat. As the car slowly drives away, the film also ends.